that they was condemned for having gotten the illegally. I still wonder whether I got them illegally, because these things were brought to Parliament. There was a time when there was a heavy debate in 2011, I think, between Parliament and the executive over how the SGR had been conceptualized and effected. So when these people were summoned, they came with documentation. It was a public hearing, which I attended. But I had the presence of mind when people went for lunch. I gave the clerks, I asked the clerks if they could photocopy for me. They said if they got paper, they could photocopy the documents. So I went, I got paper, I bought paper, I brought the clerks, they ran them for me. I got my copies, I took to the office, I came back. So when you say that I acquired the documents illegally, and this was a public forum where people attended, and MPs who represent the people were looking at these documents, how did those documents become illegal? After the deals were made, that's when now people, when they came from lunch, I think some sweetheart deals have been made. The documents were mopped up and taken away. And when you tell the court, this is how I acquired these documents, they say you stole them. Documents tabled and are confidential. I don't know now. Then what's the purpose of public participation if what is document tabled there cannot be released to the public? If it's confidential, the committee should go in camera and listen to people in camera. But if it is done in the public, with the presence of the public, how does it become confidential? And then you realize the last time the Supreme Court made a ruling, just before they banned Ahmed Nasir from appearing there, senior counsel, they made a ruling in which they dedicated a whole paragraph, 49, discussing me, saying that I'm embarrassing the court and I'm going to take drastic action if I don't stop. I was a party to the litigation. That issue was not before the court. The court never told me which video it is they had seen on social media of me condemning the court. The only thing the court that I mentioned on social media is when the Justice Lanaola attacked him that he had seen a Cyprian Nyakundi claiming that I had said I don't know ABCD. But I've never known what to say. So for me, these things that we have, what is happening in this country, the corruption in Busia is endemic, it's systemic, but it's also reflective of the corruption we have across the country, including dishonesty in the judiciary. The last time
Senator, please allow me to interject a little on one suggestion with regard to that question of evidence illegally obtained. Do you think it's time to move an amendment to the Evidence Act, to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act, so that we make exceptions for evidence? Because how else will you acquire evidence of corruption? It's not like these guys will come and give you evidence of them being corrupt. Is it time to amend maybe the statutes that are there, which protects that issue of using evidence that is, acquired in a questionable, quote unquote, questionable manner? And then when I have the mic, because I won't have the opportunity, a friend of mine has asked me to ask you, with that issue of recalling MPs, isn't it better to test that constitutional provision, even using that judgment of Katiba as it is right now? Because already I am aware some constituencies have begun the process before we begin looking at the issues of where the judges overreached and became managers rather than, stating the law as it is. Sorry for interjecting, that's all.
Well, I think it can be done, because
if you can add this,
the timeline they gave us almost for practical purposes, it's there. But I think the LSSK needs to simply still appeal that thing so that that restriction is not imposed. But for the current parliament, that restriction I think does not apply, except for when we go towards the close and the fact that you can only attempt once and not twice or thrice. So that's what I think I would put in terms of that. What was the other question?
On the legally obtained evidence, is it time to move an amendment to the Evidence Act and to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Act, so that even if it's an exception only on matters corruption, we have an exception that you can use this evidence regardless of how it was acquired? Because corrupt people will not come and give you evidence of them being corrupt.
Yes, that's, I think, what needs to be done. And so that also the Whistleblower Act should also be amended to show whom the whistleblower can be. Because take a case whereby somebody is working in a government institution, he has access to very, very sensitive information that is corrupt nature, not necessarily the strategic interest of the country, of corrupt nature, and he goes to Boniface Mwangi and gives Boniface Mwangi that information because he has got confidence in Boniface Mwangi. He's not trusting the police, or he believes that even if he gave to the police, it may not go anywhere. The police themselves are in handcuffs from those who control executive power. So, could it be legitimate for a whistleblower to give Boniface Mwangi a document? So, and I think also the Evidence Act needs to be amended to allow for a ring-fence provision whereby citizens can inform other citizens on corruption, and the document then is tested on its validity, on its own veracity. Because this is a document saying ABC has happened, it should be able to be adjudicated. We do not have a, just like the Article 40, Clause 6 says, that you don't have a right to stolen property. People should not use this to have a right to stolen property by making it impossible to have evidence produced adduced against them. So the Evidence Act need to be looked at. And that's why I was saying that maybe people are more better endowed than myself. People have gone to law school, people have studied these things, need to look at the laws of Kenya and align them to the Constitution of Kenya. And also, we need also to demarcate constitutional proceedings away from the ordinary civil proceedings and criminal proceedings. The failure to separate constitutional proceedings from ordinary civil proceedings is the other problem we are having. That largely, constitutional proceedings are handled under the civil procedures, which are limited to an extent that are protecting individuals. Constitutional proceedings are public law. The government has no rights. Rights belong to people. The government has only the mandate, is a duty holder, is a duty bearer where rights are involved. So that provision can be ring-fenced, that in constitutional proceedings, how evidence is acquired is not important. What's important is what does the evidence bring to the case? How does it help the court determine this dispute? And if we did that we had a clear procedure for constitutional proceedings, I know we have got what they call the Mutunga rules, which guide some of the proceedings under Article 22, but you also have the provisions of the Constitution which lie outside the Bill of Rights. What governs them when you're proceeding? Are they still the Mutunga rules? So there's a need to look at the laws of this country and maybe now have three procedures. We have got a procedure in criminal law, procedures in civic matters, and procedures in constitutional disputes. Then that way maybe we shall help ourselves. So the other thing I'll go to when I'm answering will be what is left. I've done with the question of tribalism. I've dealt with the issues of infrastructure in Busia. I've dealt with the question of recycling leaders generally. I've dealt with the police ruling on the use of certain gadgets during riots and the disobedience of those orders and how the fellows are supposed to be held accountable. I have also dealt with the question of the statistics. I've dealt with the recall to right to recall in relation to the decision by the Katiba Institute. The last question is that, will I run for president if the people say I should run for president? My answer is why not? But not run for president because I want to be president, but run for president because the people think I'm the best driver of the vehicle they have invented. If there's a clear vehicle that wants to turn the direction of this country, and people think I'm the best driver to drive it, I will have a duty to do so. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. For now, nothing is ruled out, nothing is ruled in. Everything is possible, because I'll tell you, when you are at war, you don't leave the war to soldiers. War is never won by soldiers. War is won by the general population, which rises up behind the soldiers. So if there's a groundswell that we need to go in that direction, then the rules of engagement must be very clear, but it must be me leading a team where I'm not indispensable, not a personality cult. Otherwise, I'll be set up for failure. There must be clear structures within which I'll operate, within which my influence will be limited, within which I can say no to the temptations of power. I'm not superhuman. So there must be those clear terms of engagement, but most important, as part of a team, not as an individual, collecting all manner of characters to propel him over the pass line. So the issue is open. But first of all, there has to be evidence that the Gen Z have registered as voters. And that one is a minimum, an irreducible minimum. There has to be change to the way elections are done, that the presidential election will be declared at the constituency and not at Bomas. And then what remains just aggregation of what happened. We must have a digital election. If those things are in place, I comfortably run for the president of this country if the people of Kenya think I'm the best candidate within the particular moment to do so. But we must work and get ourselves to that point whereby we have tamper-proof elections that can be declared in real time without those who cook election having time to manipulate and interfere with the elections. That could be my answer.
Afro, I have another question to the senator. Can I proceed?
I wanted to get someone to ask a question. Let me ask.
Let me just ask, because it is the issue that in the issue aliongelea, and I really want to get it done. So can I proceed?
Okay, please ask one last question. You have many people.
Okay, then just a minute. Okiyah Omtatah, you had talked about Busia airstrip. There is this area from Busia, Kwanzia, Tanaka. From Tanaka, when you go all the way to Roadblock, that area is where we term it as the airstrip. But the area right now have people building on that land, yet it is government land. People have grabbed it. As the senator, what are you doing to ensure that we still have an airstrip in Busia? The other issue is if you go to Busia Korinda area, there is this area in Korinda where the government had moved market just opposite Busia prisons. That market since then has never been functional because there are people who wanted to get rent from those people that were buying shops. I tried to purchase a shop there in 2022, but 2021, 2022, but I was not successful because I was told, bring money so that we can give you a shop. They were asking for 150,000 to give me a kiosk that place. I declined and bought a shop just close to Roadblock. The other last question is, Okiyah Omtatah, right now we are having a revolution whereby the president was speaking about budgets and borrowing. Don't you think you legislators are earning a lot of money which should be cut at least to around 250,000 shillings per legislator so that we can create more jobs and create more income for the country? Because we have to live by our means. We should not go out borrowing. What is your take on that, on the salaries of MPs being cut? Thank you.
Sawa sawa. Thanks, Six. I think, Senator, there was a lady who had been trying to put a question through. Hannah, are you ready to give your whatever? And I can see Mariam also has her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Afrocentric and Chege. I think you couldn't hear me, so I had to drop out and come back. Thank you, Afro. Senator, thank you for a very informative and lengthy description and discussion on matters that you were asked. But in regards to the last question, if I may start there, but I wanted to talk about something else. There is no safeguarding the evidence. I don't think would do anything much if we are not giving any incentives to the whistleblowers. That's number one. Number two, whistleblower protection. If the whistleblowers are not protected, then you would not have many people who have any reason to come forward with this. So I don't know why that up to now there is actually in the law, there is no provisions for the whistleblower. There is no protection for those whistleblowers. Because if there was, believe you me, we would have more whistleblowers and maybe things would not get as ugly as they have. Now, that said and done, there was the petition that you said send it to you or bring it to you. That petition has already been brought to the House. And I'm sorry, Kenyans, but I don't know. Why do we have proportion representation if those women rep are not actually working on matters to do with women, matters that affect women? They're there and they're supposed to be at the center of legislations making that affect directly or indirectly affecting women. So for me, I think that also is a failure. I don't know how other women in Kenya feel, but I think it's a man's world out there. Yes, the government have tried. They've put they've said women representation, a proportion representation. They've allocated some seats for us. This was actually Western propagated, but is it still delivering for women? I do not think so. If this bill is there with the woman Senate and it's still not being touched, there's a lot of decisions and there are a lot of policies surrounding women's right that the government, the people who are representing women are actually not on most of those caucuses. And if they're there, they're actually overpowered by the men in those caucuses. So I don't know how our representation in this houses where the legislations are made is helping us, because you would see some caucus are more men than women, and these are decisions that are being made that affect women directly or indirectly more than the men, and women are not there despite the allocation of seats for women. So back to you, Senator. Thank you very much.
Mariam?
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. Good morning, Afrocentric. Now, I had two questions. One of them was when it comes to the county budgets, kindly, Senator, how much of it is allocated to salaries? That is, I would want to know how much of it is allocated to the wages and operational issues. And then the second question I had was around procurement. You know, when we're talking about corruption, we talk about it very vaguely, but we don't pinpoint where the money is lost when we say corruption. I think most of the money is usually lost in procurement. So do they use County Procurement Act or do they use a National Procurement Act? And I really hope he could answer me directly so that I can give a follow-up question. And the next thing I wanted to ask him is how can he streamline the...
Procurement is done by the national legislation. There's no county legislation for procurement.
Or the act itself?
Yeah.
So is it possible for us to have it on a county level? Because, for example, when I'm looking at your portal right now, I'm not able to access your tender documents because they're restricted. And we know that the counties lose a lot of money in, of course, wages and in the procurement. And how they lose it in the procurement is in the inflated bills because of the kickbacks and all that. And we know why people do kickbacks. So is it possible to streamline the Procurement Act on the county level? And number two, is it possible to have your budget uploaded on a portal that is open to everyone, and then all the tenders that are won to be put on the portal, actually the 3 top tenders, so that they can be open to public scrutiny, so that if there's anything that has been inflated, people can actually challenge it and they can be withdrawn from that tender process. Is it possible to do that? I think that's really one way of streamlining the corruption issue on a county level. So my first question to you was, what percentage of your budget goes to the wage? Can you answer me now, please, so that I can ask a follow-up question?
The wage bill should not be more than 35% of the entire budget. And development expenditure.
I'm sorry. No, I've asked you a very specific question because I know that only 11 counties are able to adhere to the 35% threshold that has been recommended, and your county is not among them. So what percentage of your...
Just wait for him to finish.
No, he already said it was supposed to be, Chege. He said it was supposed to be, but I've asked him how much is it. He said it's supposed to be 35%.
Allow him to finish.
Yeah, no, I think I've gotten her question. My account is not among them. I think my account is in the 40s, about 48%, but you don't have the latest audit, because the audits that you have sent from the control of budget is a 2021 audit. That's the one I've been able to scrutinize. I'm currently scrutinizing the budgets from 2022, the 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024 budgets, because even the reports from the county, from the Auditor General, are not so clear. So I've had to retain the services of a private firm, which I've paid 2 million shillings from my various allowances to be able to do a forensic audit on those books of what you have been able to get, including what you have been able to get illegally under the table from the treasury and from wherever. Even from the county, some officials have given us some documents. So we're subjecting them to a public audit. And that's why I was telling you that in that public audit, we are having a problem with about 2.3 billion, where it had gone. And right now, we have not reached to audit the current state of affairs in the county assembly, because when the employment, the county board is also opaque. You don't know who is employed, you don't know who is not employed. It's very difficult to know what has happened there. So among the documents we require to be given to us are also documents from the county, the board, the county public board. And so I think it's a question I might not be able to pinpoint, but the fact is that the Busia County is over-established. But also there's another problem that the counties are facing, that where people are looking at counties as employment bureaus. And I'll play the advocate devil and say that most governors are terribly under fire for employment. And these are politicians who go and look for votes and make all these funny promissory things. And I think that was a mistake, because when you remember, what could cure that? Could be to centralize some of these employment opportunities so that they are done by the Public Service Commission. I don't know. Could be a wrong proposal, but there's a problem in employment across the country. And given the failure to have industries to industrialize this country, then government remains as the single largest source of jobs. So everybody's looking at the jobs. Counties are not proactive in creating an environment for investors to come and invest and create jobs. There are very, very many opportunities, even in Busia, for this kind of things. But you'll find that they are not tapped. And so what remains is that the county governments have to employ. Another thing with the percentages, if I look at in real terms, I think Busia, in real terms, is performing under 35% of the revenue, because a lot of revenue is being lost. On source revenue is being lost. There's no way that Busia County Council, before the constitution came in, was aggregating something up to 800 million shillings annually in collections. The county government came in, the figure continued diminishing. We are now doing about 100 million a year, 100 to 200 million a year. If you compare to the Kenya Revenue Authority, the Kenya Revenue Authority, which was almost at par with the county council, is doing about 1.5 B in terms of revenues. So it's not acceptable that the money raised from the ground is being stolen on the revenue side, not necessarily on the expenditure side. So we lose the fight against the so-called theft of public resources, which we mischaracterize as corruption, when we only look at the expenditure side of things. On the revenue side of things, a lot of money is stolen. Money is collected, it never gets to the county coffers. There's a very clear law that the county government should not have accounts in commercial banks. I think Busia has got more than 20 accounts in commercial banks and things like those. So, and these are the accounts that are used to launder money. So to me, I think that in real terms of revenue, the revenue of Busia County, we are performing at around 20% in terms of employment. Because if you look at the figures of the county government, the county council, the local authorities, compared to the figures of the devolved county governments, it's not acceptable that the county government should be collecting less than those local authorities, which had less business, the tickets were cheaper, the opportunities were less. If you look at even the growth of the towns, it should be collecting over 1 billion shillings. Busia County should be collecting over 1 billion shillings. Even the estimations from the government, the control of budget and the others, show that the Busia should be collecting over 1 billion shillings. And I believe they collect over 1 billion shillings. But this money never gets to the coffers of the county. So that's where we are. On the issue of the airstrip plant, as I told you that the maps in Kakamega, I think they're totally doctored. I don't know, I'm not a land surveyor or whatever. I don't know why the maps are different. I had to go to the survey of Kenya to get the maps that could show that Busia had an airstrip. There are very many things, even things of design. Somebody decided to come and put a prison in Corinda, right inside town. Why do you have a prison in town? It is sitting on about 50 acres of land. Why should a prison sit on 50 acres of land inside town? And this is a town that is a border town that cannot grow towards Uganda. It can only grow backwards into Kenya. So why should you have a prison chewing up 50 acres of land in the CBD? The prison needs to also be relocated to somewhere else where it can be of use. And then the land be released to enterprise. So the case I have against the Busia airstrip, it covers, as I told you, I did a research beginning in 1952. The question was that Parliament had validated the ownership of the airstrip land by the grabbers and had even started a process of compensating them for the same land. If the Kenya government wanted to use the land as an airstrip, they should compensate these people. There's a report of Parliament, there's a committee of Parliament that sat and made that resolution. So to overcome that, and these things were brought to Parliament, to court, to show that this was it, I had to go back and look at the records outside government records. And I was able to reconstruct a very, very clear narrative that showed that Busia did not just have one airstrip in Busia town. It had an airstrip in Funyula. It had an airstrip in Atamukura in Teso, which have all been grabbed. So out of that, I was able to get that when Alupe Hospital was made a regional center for diseases covering East and Central Africa as a center of excellence for diseases. There was need for that airstrip there. And the local people donated the land. They were not even paid for the land. It was not a compulsory acquired. They donated the land. They were only paid for cassava. What they were paying 1 cent per cassava stem. And that's how they ceded the land to the colonial government, and an airstrip was established, which was serving these people. When an aircraft crashed in the, is it 2013? Is it 2013? No, 203. When an aircraft crashed in 203, I think it was 203. That's when machinations came up and people began saying that the airstrip was not viable, what have you, what have you. And people grabbed that land, and they were in the, then they condemned the land, facilitated the grabbers to take over, and then they moved on land which was available, which had been set aside for Busia Sugar Factory. 83, it was 843 acres of land. They looked at that land, they went and grabbed that land, then they condemned the airstrip, and they went to Kenya Airports Authority, no, to Kenya Airports Authority, and struck a deal to have the land, the airport authority buy the Nasawa land, the Busia Sugar Factory land, the 843 acres of land from them, so that they could relocate the airstrip from the Busia town to the new land they grabbed, and they are going to get 1.2 billion shillings in that transaction. So when I intervened and blocked that transaction, and I was able to recover the 843 acres of land and restored it, I even won the court case in the High Court, in the Court of Appeal. I went and processed the title deed, and I called the county commission and handed over the title deed for that land in the name of the PS Finance. I did not do it in the name of Busia County government because I knew the county government would still mess up with that land. They had no capacity to invest in 843 acres. So I registered in the name of the national government. I gave the title deed back to the national government. Then I went back and I began fighting to recover the airstrip land. And that's where the war is right now. And I've been able to establish the acreage of the airstrip from the maps I got from the survey of Kenya. And now all the title deeds are lined up for being quashed. Initially, the Attorney General did not support the case, but now the Attorney General has filed a case, has filed an affidavit in that case that is even beyond what I had filed, showing how that land is public land. With the treaties between the Kenya government, between the colonial government and the local chiefs and what have you around there. I didn't have that good documentation, because the documentation I had was from the ordinary narrative. So the AG has done an excellent job. I don't know if it's the changes in the office of the OG, I don't know, but I've filed an affidavit that has now basically where I sit. I can say that there's no way that land can remain in private hands, because the record clearly shows it's public land and it's 30 acres of land. Now the question is, can that land still be used for an airstrip? And my position is that it may not be viable for an airstrip because around it, because it was neglected, private developers with legitimate lands have since put up buildings, story buildings. Also, it is right on the border. The aircraft has to overfly Ugandan airspace sometimes before it can get to the height it needs to fly. Also, it has to go to Ugandan airspace when it wants to land before it can land. So we may need to look for alternative land in Busia, and the Busia is a land where the airport can, and I think Busia needs an airport, not an airstrip, because it can cover eastern Uganda, it can cover Uganda, eastern Congo, and the Sudan. You can have an international airport there, which will bring in a lot of revenues from these countries. Instead of talking about an airstrip, you have an airport, and this land is available. But then once the land, if I succeed in my case, and I hope I'll succeed, and the land is recovered and restored to the county government, the 30 acres that the airstrip sits on should be converted to a modern, should be used to replan Busia town. Busia town has got no plan. It just grew like a mushroom. Should be used to replan Busia town so that you can know what is the industrial area, what is the shopping area, what is what and what. And then maybe the people within the Busia town be given models, the owners of land, and be told, well, you're given about 5 years to upgrade your buildings to this kind of structure, or you lose ownership. So all those things need to be done. It's not a walk in the park, but it's not impossible. It may just take a bit longer. Me, I don't believe that anything that's against the law can be impossible to do. It may just take a bit longer. As long as the law allows it, nothing is impossible. But it may not be a walk in the park. So that's where we are. And I think the other thing is salaries of MPs. Salaries of MPs is something I've engaged with for quite some time. In 2008, the MPs the first thing the MPs, around that time, the MPs just hiked their salaries. And I went and looked at the constitution. I think it was section 41 of the old constitution. And when I read it, I did not find that it really allowed people to pay themselves. And then I went and looked at the act. There was an act called the National Assembly Remuneration Act of 1978, which was moved by the late President Mwai Kibaki when he was a minister. He then moved the motion, and that's the law that allowed MPs from 1978 to begin paying themselves or setting their salaries and packs. So, Nation, I wrote an article in the Nation, and then Nation TV. No, it was a Nation. Yeah, it was Nation TV. Yeah, NTV hosted me with the then MP Mudama on the issue. And as well as I was discussing, I said that I had come, I looked at the law and I had seen this, and I'm preparing a petition to Parliament to repeal the National Assembly Remuneration Act of 1978, so that the MPs can, like everybody else, be paid by an independent body. Now, after the interview, I traveled to Busia by overnight bus. In the morning, I got a call from a number I did not know. The person introduced himself as Kibe Mungai, advocate. Kibe Mungai told me, I have watched you on TV and you have checked the laws you are referring to, and I'm surprised that this thing is there. Nobody has seen it. What I want to do is and then you have said you want to go to Parliament. He said, if you go to Parliament, you'll achieve nothing, because that's where the problem is. I want us to go to court and file a case to have that law declared unconstitutional. So that was my first encounter with litigation. So I gave my name. Kibe Mungai drew the pleadings. We went to court. It did not move very fast. It was all this and that and the other. Eventually, we succeeded. That time the constitution had come in place and stuff. We succeeded, and the courts declared the National Assembly Remuneration Act of 1978 unconstitutional, null and void, and deleted it from the laws of Kenya. That's how the mandate to pay MPs went back to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, now that the constitution had been there. But then there has been another problem that they have been claiming, that the Parliamentary Service Commission should have a free hand in terms of the packs and what have you of the MPs, and not the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. But my reading of it is that the Salaries and Remuneration Commission should have a free hand to set the salaries of all state officers and to direct and or guide the government on the salaries of other public officers. In fact, for state officers, it is to set their salaries. It's for other public officers that it performs an advisory role. But for state officers, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission should set salaries of state officers. MPs are state officers. The issue of the housing allowance, the MPs voted themselves. I went and litigated, and I was able to recover money from each MP. And the last time when MPs went for elections, most of them were broke because money was being recovered from their accounts out of a litigation I did and won, to say that you cannot pay yourself. So that's housing, whatever was taken back. Now, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission is in charge of setting salaries of state officers and advising on salaries of public officers. My argument has always been this: the salaries of the president and the salary of the sweeper, there must be a formula connecting the two. And maybe one should not be more than 10 times the other one. Right time now is n times. And if we did that we tied the salaries of the public, we made them interrelated. So the salary of the lowest paid public officer and the salary of the highest paid public officer, there's a correlation and maybe there's a formula determining those salaries. We'll get away from this issue whereby some people are paid astronomical salaries and other perks, and some people hardly get anything to do. And tied to that, we must also get to a position whereby public institutions get away from the tender mechanisms in labor, should not be allowed to subcontract for labor. Look at the security guards working for many government institutions. They issue a tender. Somebody has gotten some very poor and desperate Kenyans, trained them how to march, put them in a kraal of some sort, holds them like cattle, goes and gets a tender with NSSF. NSSF pays maybe 25,000 shillings per security guard to this company. This company goes and pays 10,000 shillings to this person, no benefits, nothing else. This person lives in squalor, but he's exploited, he's under slavery. We might need to reach to a point whereby we say that the government cannot subcontract for labor. If you want to hire security guards, government and agencies, hire these people and pay them those wages we are paying the private contractors, and give them benefits that are contractual, so that when they, at the end of their pay, they know that they have something to take home, they know they have something like this. Not the government itself facilitating the exploitation and abuse of its labor resource. Just because there's something called tenders. Everybody's tendering. The government is supplying. It's just crazy. Even the Ministry of Works today, I don't know if they even own a single earth mover. Where is the time where the Ministry of Works constructed roads on the cheap? What happened? We look at billions of shillings spent on roads. I wonder just why can't the ministry do it? And then we are contracting China Road and Bridges, which is a government parastatal in China. Your government is contracting a parastatal from another country to come and do roads. What the hell is wrong with us? Today, if a disaster happened and a building collapsed in Nairobi, only Republican institution we have left is the military. It's the only one that might come with heavy equipment. Otherwise, all the equipment that will come on site will be hired from the private sector. Is that how we're going to run a country? We cannot surrender the country to market forces. That's where the problem is. So the salaries of the MPs can also not be surrendered to market forces. If you want to become an MP, you must know you are going to serve. It's a republic. It's the Republic of Kenya. The name Republic of Kenya is not decorative. It's not a decorative part of the name of this country. It means we are a government of law. We are a space governed by law. And people have rights under the law. So if you are going to be public officials, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission should do the honorable thing of showing us the correlation between salaries of people. Right now, you look at the salary of the president and the salary of a clerk and the PAC. There's no correlation. Absolutely none. So those are the kind of things we need to look at. As for the question of whether or not the Parliamentary Service Commission can override the Salaries and Remuneration Commission in terms of allowances and other perks of MPs. We fought in the High Court. I succeeded. We are now in the Court of Appeal. Me and the Salaries and Remuneration Commission on one side, the Parliamentary Service Commission and I think the AG and others on the other side. with the Parliament and the Senate on the other side. When the matter came up before the bench in the Court of Appeal, one of the judges asked me a very direct question. Omtatah, when you came to this court, you are not a senator. You are not an MP. Today you are an MP. Has your position changed? And I told the judge it has not changed. My position remains the same, that under no circumstances should any group of individuals be able to determine their salaries and allowances. That's the position. The matter is in the Court of Appeal. We are slugging it out. I hope we succeed, and maybe we escalate to the Supreme Court, because we are interpreting, I think it's Article 172, no, 127 or 172, I'm a bit confused, on the Parliamentary Service Commission. But so be it. So I think that one, there's no justification for the kind of salaries we're getting compared to what everybody else is getting from the public service. We must create a relationship. Going to public office, you don't go to public office to get rich. You should go to public office to serve. And maybe if we do that, we shall restore the honor of the Parliament of Kenya to what it was when the likes of Tom Mboya, Masinda Muliro, Martin Shikuku, Ronald Ngala, J.M. Karaoke, Seronei, and many others, Chelagat, and many, many others were elected to represent people. And they were not Weshimiwas, but they were Wajumbe. They used to be called Wajumbe. I don't know where the word Weshimiwa came from. When I was growing up, MPs were called Wajumbe. Mujumbe wa Busia, North. Mine was called Mujumbe wa Amagoro constituency. Initially, it was Busia North, then became Amagoro. So that's the kind of things we hear. Mujumbe wa Bunyala, Mujumbe wa Samia, Mujumbe wa wherever, Embakasi. Not Mweshimiwa, and Mweshimiwa sio Mweshimiwa pale popote, ni Mweshimiwa of himself. You see, even the adjective is tied to the individual. The Mweshimiwa is a title that ties to you. Mujumbe reminds you of your work. Because when Mujumbe wa fulani, wewe si Mheshimiwa wa Busia, hakuna Mheshimiwa wa Busia, hakuna Mheshimiwa wa Kariobangi, hakuna Mheshimiwa wa Kikuyu, ni Mjumbe, ni Mheshimiwa kivyake. You see, this mindset. But also among the people of Kenya, we have got a problem. The other time I was involved in an accident and it was highlighted in the media, and people realized I was in a small vehicle. I always drive small vehicles because I find them cheap to fuel. And me, I don't believe that I am defined by what I own. I'm defined by my character, not by what I own. So I was condemned that how come a senator is driving a small Nissan? How come? There was even a drive to buy my vehicle. I don't know where that money went. There was a drive to buy my vehicle. A vehicle worth some 6 or 7, 8 million shillings, which I said, well, if you buy me, I'll take it. I'll keep it. I'll use it whenever I can fuel it. Money was, I told at one time it reached 2 million shillings. I don't know where the money ended up. But look at that problem whereby you don't condemn the reckless road driver who was driving a petrol tanker full of fuel and nearly deleted me from this world. If he had just hit me a few inches to the side of my driver, I would not be talking today. Instead of condemning that driver who was a reckless driver and a vehicle was unfit, petrol tanker, I'm being condemned for running a small vehicle. But the reality is, even if I was driving the latest V8 or whatever, I don't know these big vehicles, what they're called. I don't know their names. Even if I had the latest car, can you stand up to a petrol tanker? You can't. So road safety cannot be reduced to the kind of vehicle you drive. The road must be safe for everybody. The road must be safe for pedestrians. The roads must be built for pedestrians and cyclists. This culture where we build roads only for people who drive, and yet everybody pays taxes, must stop. People walking on foot should have roads. People riding bicycles should have roads. The very many accidents we're having sometimes today is because we have got no roads for cyclists, and we have got no roads for separate roads for pedestrians. All roads are built for motor vehicles. So those are why we come to, and these are done when the society expects people to consume big, to live large, then people are saying, mimi kama senator sahi, mimi sio yule mtata wa jana activist, mimi ni senator. Kwa hivyo hata nikitaka kupanda lift lazima ningoje clerk akuja abofye lift ikuja ndio mimi nipande hiyo lift. You see, so we cannot allow that. So let us also have a society that looks at it and realizes that these tools that we have, the watches, vehicles, belts, and these are just trinkets. And these are the same things that were used by the chiefs of the old to sell Africans into slavery. They were given trinkets and they sold each other to slavery. Today, corruption has become the new method whereby people taking trinkets and they sell each other, others to slavery. They make the homeland unhospitable. That's why there was one late, there was a Nigerian guy who used to live here, was in a civil society. He used to say that that in the early days, Africans were forced into slavery. But today, if a big ship came to Mombasa with a brand, slavery is required in Europe or in the USA, the scramble will be unbelievable. There will be no space on that ship for people scrambling to get to the USA, to get to the EU, to be slaves there. Because the motherland is totally messed up. We must get our country back. And you people who have risen up, the Gen Z, are the people to get this country back. We must get a developmental state working. A state that develops the human resource, develops proper infrastructure, develops proper industry, so that this country can take off. And that can be done in a period of 5 years, given the amount of money we lost in this country. So the next thing we have is the whistleblower protection. On whistleblower protection, yes, there's a law to it, but you see, we are approaching whistleblower protection without realizing our own limitations. A country like the USA, where this concept of whistleblower protection came from, is an entire continent. The USA is just virtually a continent. So maybe like from Nairobi to Lagos, you are still in the USA. It is so huge. And so it is easy to protect people, and among the tools they do is even change identity, relocate people from one state to another, and make people disappear but still they continue their lives. In Kenya, our options are very, very limited. We are a very, very small space. So those the law on whistleblower protection, which I think we needs to be relooked at, and we look at what realities are there that we can protect our whistleblowers. And maybe some levels of whistleblowing might require removing somebody from this municipality to a different country, from this jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, and changing their identity so that they can have a new life there. So all those kind of things need to be considered. Otherwise, the idea of saying safe houses, what have you, to me is just arrant nonsense. If the thugs want to get you, they will even get you in that safe house. So they need a slightly more elaborate legal and policy framework to protect whistleblowers. But I also think that the whistleblower should be so considered where people release information to private individuals and tell them, hey, do you know that the last elections, the last recruitment, like just the other day, somebody came to me, was in Kisumu, and somebody says, I've been wondering how to get you. And he walks to me with a pile of paper and he tells me, look, if you go to this called the Kenya Investment Authority, they have cancelled recruitment of the CEO 4 times. This is the 5th time they are going to recruitment. But now they've bitten the bullet by the I've decided to bite the bullet and say now they've lowered the qualifications that are required to make you the CEO of the Kenya Investment Authority. And I've removed these requirements, and there's somebody in mind whom they want to make who has failed ever through. But now this time, even this time, he had failed. And they've had to amend they've had to recall the shortlist, remove people who are qualified in the shortlist, and put these people on the shortlist. And please see what you can do. Now, he gave me the documentation showing everything that has happened. But because of the court order that I cannot use these documents in court, all I could do was to put a letter on to write a letter to the chairman of the last week. I wrote a letter to the chairman of the Kenya Investment Authority, telling him I've got this information. What they are doing is wrong. They should recruit according to the law, or we shall have to fight over that. But my hands have such a good information that I would go to court and get orders immediately, but my hands are tied. The fact that they will tell me, the Supreme Court said you must acquire documents in such a formula. The idea that somebody gave you documents on the street, those are the documents that were legitimately acquired, you can't use them. But that's the truth. So I had to write a letter, and I wrote the letter and served them. I also copied the letter to the president. I copied the letter to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and staff. I don't know what actions they'll take. So this is the kind of country we live in. And so the whistleblower is operating in a very, very toxic environment, and sometimes a fruitless environment. And we've got whistleblowers who have died. The guy who blew the whistle on the golden bag was killed. So we really need to know how to deal with this issue.
Senator Omtatah, I wanted to give the chance to Professor Kibwana to say something. He's about to leave. We have more questions for you. So I just wanted to chime in at this moment, Governor Kibwana, and we'll come back to you, sir. Is that okay?
Okay. That's okay. Quite in order.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I've sacrificed my mass today to be here. I'll go for mass in the evening.
Thank you so much, sir. And we still need you. We need all this knowledge that you're sharing with us. It's really impactful for us, educative for us. Governor
Kibwana is one fellow who demonstrated that devolution can work. Before he speaks, that's one man when he was a governor of Makueni, he demonstrated that devolution can work. So thank you, and I would be very willing to listen to the good professor.
Professor, the microphone is yours. Karibu kwenye space.
Asante sana, Afrocentric. I have really also postponed my going to Mass, but I am going soon to listen to this very critical conversation, and particularly about these reflections on SABA SABA Day. And let me first of all congratulate you for this space because we are learning a lot, we are dialoguing, and Gen Zs are really showing us the way forward in terms of how our country can be reformed, reimagined for the immediate future. And I want to really say, listening to all of you and Omtatah, in terms of the knowledge that he has of law, of how he gets information, data, so that even when it's not always easy, so that he can get certain things done, it's extremely commendable. And at Senate, Omtatah, Sifuna, they really encourage us in terms of how parliamentary business can be done. So congratulations, Okiyah, Heko. I am also your fan. Now, in terms of the SABA SABAs, the history of the SABA SABAs, of course, we know, first of all, there was Mau Mau for the first liberation, and we know how they really wanted colonialism ended, and they wanted proper decolonization. And they were young people, some of them just like the Gen Zs. because even Kimathi was not 40 by the time the British people hanged him and so on. So that is really like the reference point of how we have tried to get away from this colonial system, colonial institutions, colonial economic arrangements, and all that. Then we had the first SABA SABA 1990, when Jaramogi, Matiba, Rubia, and others, including the Young Turks initially, were pushing for the dissolution of the 21 years of one-partyism from 1969 when KPU was annulled. And that was driven more, that SABA SABA, the first SABA SABA, was driven more by the political opposition then. And of course, we know the bloodshed that resulted as an article by Houghton Irungu, as shown as recently. Then we had 7 years later, 1997, we had another very epical SABA SABA, where the National Convention Assembly, the National Executive Council, where I participated a bit in, was trying to say, yes, we got the first liberation, it's not kind of working, it was subverted. Now we want Katiba. And so there was, again, a lot of, bloodshed and many negative things. You remember what happened to Njoya and so on. And again, we were really saying that we want a reset of the country. And that is why I'm very excited about now the life and times of the Gen Z movement, because they are ushering in the third SABA SABA of 2024, which is about 24 years, I think several years after the 1997 SABA SABA. So in a way, this is the third epical SABA SABA, and we really need to appreciate these young people who have come out. And what is very important for me is they are actually living the change they want. Like when they say they don't want to be tribeless, they want leadership of people together, not just hoisting one person and saying that is the leader, we will look up to him or her, and we will do what they tell us. So you can see that they're changing the political narrative, the political culture, even in terms of when you do wrong things, they call you out. And so that is exciting, because they are, like Mahatma Gandhi said, they're actually living the change they want. And I hope that continues, and I hope that changes even the character in a deep way of these young people who want to see different in Kenya and in Africa. I think we need to tell them that as they continue the civic education, as they broaden this through technology, through online forms like what Afrocentric is doing, we need to warn them that, like in Mau Mau was overtaken by politicians. Even NCC was overtaken by politicians during IPPG. So I think the Gen Zs need to know that even when some of the, not Omtatah, but some of the opposition are beginning to say, yeah, these young people are doing very well, and going to some of the funerals and so on, they have to know that they have to be very protective of this new thing that they are creating. And I think for me, that will be very, very important, because it's easy to capture a movement that wants reimagining Kenya, looking at these institutions, looking at the laws, the policies, they all works, so that we have something that can take us, forward in a real way. Let me very quickly just say one point about the recall of both MPs as well as MCS, because the law is more or less the same. I think the case, the Katiba case, that was referred to by both Omtatah and also a colleague in the space. There are some important things it did, because before a recall, the parliamentarians had made sure that there was to be a judgment of the High Court, which said that you can be recalled, that the reasons for recall according to the Constitution and also some that they put in the election law itself could exist. And the Kanyik, Kemondo, and other courts and other judges, they said that it was not necessary to have that judgment of the court to validate a recall. They also said that even if you were in an election, you can still petition for a recall, because before the law had said that if you were a contestant, you couldn't do so. And there was even another onerous thing of 50% of the total number of voters to be able to support the recall, even before the election itself, and that was struck down. But of course, the 2-year thing and the 12 months before the elections, I think since, and I think this has been said in this forum, since now 2 months are going to end in August, I think those who are preparing for recalls don't have that impediment, so to speak. And I think that is something that must be clarified, so that people who want to do impeachments because some of the MPs are not behaving properly, will know that they can do that within the ambit of the law. Of course, if we had moved to say that because of not passing the gender principle or gender rule, Omtatah calls it gender principle, because of not passing that, Parliament can stand, the National Assembly can stand dissolved. Actually, Parliament can stand dissolved. That is still something that people can work on, because it's still a live issue. Because up to now, Parliament has not passed, this gender principle, so that within the Constitution, as we go to any elections, it is something that now works. So that is also another issue that can be used to actually tell Parliament that now, because you have not passed this, we want to ask that you go home. And I think that's important, because this less than 1/3, so that there's 2/3. Nobody can have 2/3. No gender can have 2/3 in the Parliament, in the county assemblies, and so on. The county assemblies are okay. I think that's an important thing to do. I think when we come to the emoluments, and Omtatah has described that very well. You see, the salary itself, if it's 1 million for MP or slightly less, you have to look at the sitting allowances. You have to look at the travel allowances when people are going for benchmarking and all that. And you might discover in certain instances, people get even more through those allowances and so on. And therefore, that is why it is really important to go to both the CRC as well as the Parliamentary Commission and say that these salaries, like that formula Omtatah was saying, must be realistic, and the salaries of all public servants must be realistic. And all these allowances, like people going to Tanzania when they are from just a nearby county, because the per diem rate is high, and even those per diem rates to be reviewed.
I think his connection.
Yeah. Governor, I think we have lost you there.
Maybe he has also started receiving phone calls. Ameguza per DM.
Yeah, through the host, while still on that discussion, can I say something real quick?
Yes, as he comes back.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what was informed by Senator Omtatah is that the returning officers, the ones that are in the constituents, can actually call for a, for an election, right? But then, per Dr. Kivutha Kibwana, it sounds like we can also call a referendum. Maybe I'm the one who did not understand it. So do we go the election way, or do we go referendum way? And if we go to referendum way, is it Mwananchi that calls it, or is it still the same returning officers? Thank you.
I don't know whether, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Crystal, yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was saying that even in terms of the recall, whatever now, the judgment said with some of those positive things that it had, but also still staying within the 2 years and not the last 12 months. I'm saying that because the 2 years are now over, and I think that was even said by Omtatah, because they're over, it means that people can institute recall initiatives. But I also was trying to argue that Parliament was actually told that it could be dissolved because it had refused to pass the gender principle, the gender rule. And that is something that is still live, and it is something that people can proceed on and say, we will like to actually, we want all of Parliament to be dissolved because you have not passed what you are supposed to pass, and there are mechanisms from the Supreme Court to the President to dissolve Parliament in those circumstances.
Professor, sorry to cut you short. I hate doing this, but since it's such an emotive issue, and we and the Gen Zs are accused of being rowdy and whatever, how do you do that while still remaining within the Constitution? Are we supposed to go to court and then we are given court dates 3 months away and things like that? How do we do it while still remaining constitutional and not being looking like a riot?
Well, it is actually provided by the Constitution, because what happened was when the Constitution was passed 2010, it had also a schedule detailing which laws had to be, which constitutional amendments, what had to happen according to the Constitution, whether there are some actions required, some laws required. And
are you referring to the schedule where it had dates and
yes, in the schedule.
Yes, okay.
Yes, precisely. And if you don't do what you are requested to do by the specific time, then you can be censured. And actually, there have been even attempts to get Parliament to pass the gender rule, or Parliament is dissolved. But of course, because ultimately the President has to do it, even when the Supreme Court recommends, the President has to do it, and therefore there have been, up to now, before during President Uhuru Kenyatta, that was never done. But I remember Maraga, Justice Maraga saying that this requires to be done. So it's a question of, again, through activism, through going to court, saying that this is supposed to have been done. And of course, one result it can have is to trigger Parliament to be able to restore, to actualize it. So this is not a question which is outside the Constitution. It is a question that is actually squarely within the Constitution. But even for recall purposes, because the 2 years are over August next month, that is maybe a ready pathway to achieve what is necessary. And that is why I think some of the constituencies are already doing spade work to prepare themselves if they are unhappy with the MPs according to the provisions of both the Constitution, the provisions of the Constitution that Omtatah was able to document. the argument of the IEBC Act, Section 88, for Article 88, subsection 4, clearly of the Constitution clearly says the role of the IEBC in terms of the Commission, what it does, directing the elections and referenda and voter registration and referenda, all those things. So, and of course, the situation of it has to eventually declare the results. Yes, according to the minor KI case, the results are at the polling station, and what the Commission does is to aggregate them, and actually most of the spade work of the aggregation is done by the Secretariat, but they according to the law they have to declare not the chair but the Commission in totality, because the Supreme Court says this is not a question of the chair alone. So it may be difficult for the Secretariat to act as if it is both the Secretariat and the rest of the commissioners, and that is why, following Omtatah's argument of the creation, and I think this is also Muguna's argument of the creation of a transitional authority, if there is a vacuum, I think one would have to think through carefully, how do you constitute that transitional authority, presumably through Article 1 of the Constitution, and how does that traditional authority create the IEBC if the IEBC would not have been created. So I think those are areas where there has to be, more thought and more clarity in my view. And even because the president did say that next week he will do the necessary regarding IEBC. One of the problems that I've had, and it's also an historical problem, is the political class provides the majority of the panel members of 9. I think they provide 5, if I'm not incorrect. They provide 5, and the other 4 are provided by LSK, the accountants, ISPAC, and the 2 from the religious sector. So you see, these are contestants in the elections, and they want to influence how the referees will be determined. So I think that's one area, although the process as of now has gone very far, but that is one area of contestation, because so long as the political class determines who becomes the commissioners, we will continue to have problems. And that's why we had like some commissioners appearing to be for, in the last elections, to be for one section of the politicians and another section. So that is also something that we require to think through. Maybe another Afrocentric, another issue is, the president said, yes, I freeze the Finance Act because I have heard the voice of the Gen Zs, but I will activate the Appropriation Act because some expenditures are necessary from 1st of July. And the Appropriation Act is basically a summary of the budget. And then the president also proceeded to say that there are certain cuts of the budget of roughly about 177, 178 billion. I think it was better if there is a debate about the cuts, so that the president has done his input. Then there is the input of the Gen Zs and the citizenry of Kenya in terms of also a continuing public participation, so that that matter is resolved in a way so that people can say, we want more money, to this, to health, to education. We want more money to the things that people believe. So that is still a gray area even before there's a revisit of the Finance Act. One thing that Omtatah said is Senate has considered the audit reports of the Auditor General from 2020 to 2021. And therefore 2022-23 have not been considered, and now 2023-24 are ready for consideration. 2021-2022, 2022-2023, those are two, and now the third one, which is of this the last financial year 23-24. And you see, when those are not considered, it means that the
I think Governor, we've lost your
we've lost him again.
Professor,
I think
akiguza tu pesa.
Oh, okay. And now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can, okay. So I am saying, so long as, Senate has to speed up this process of considering the audit reports from the Auditor General, so that we can immediately, first of all, there's nothing pending, and then the counties get the money, which is equal to that is equal to the most recent collection of our taxes, and that strategy has been used actually to deny counties more and more of the money that they should have. I wanted also to say that, even within the Constitution 2010, it was indicated that all laws in Kenya were going to be reviewed, so that those which are not in consonance to the Constitution are dropped. And that is something that has been overlooked. And I think Omtatah was saying, in terms of like having a legal structure that is facilitative of proper governance and this new Kenya that the Gen Zs want. Before that is done, and it hasn't been done, and I think it is deliberate, so that we use a lot of the old laws, so to speak, because even sections of the Public Order Act are still, in the law, and sometimes they are misused. We have never gotten in a proper way the provincial administration or the national administration and the county administration to be in sync, to work in sync. So that is still an issue. And maybe finally, in terms of what was asked about the procurement law, when I had the privilege of serving in Makueni, we decided that we could have open contracting, so that every information about procurement is online, it is permanent. Even the people who are sitting in a committee, the marks that they are giving, the entire works, so that if anybody does wrong, it is apparent. People can question, and all that kind of stuff, so that it is not an impossible thing to do. Because if you have no interest in terms of getting monies from a county, from the national level, then you shouldn't worry that kind of transparency. And it worked very well, because we even now, saved monies because there was real competition. People believed that they could get tenders without bribing and all that kind of stuff. And we were able to use the money to even build things with little money, until when people came to the county, they would say it isn't possible, but it was because of that. So I think that's something to consider, because even in terms of the EACC, which is the body for making sure that there isn't, corruption and all that kind of stuff. The commissioners themselves don't do most of the work. Most of the work is done by the secretariat. Particularly the CEO is actually the engine of moving EACC forward. And so until even the commission can have more, of course, after the CEO, as the investigations and all that kind of stuff have been done, and of course they don't have budget. They try their level best. They don't have a lot of budget. They don't have a lot of employees. They are also constrained. But I think the law there needs to be looked at, and indeed, even to have a prosecutorial role. I remember, I don't know whether this has been resolved. There was an attempt to have an East African Convention on corruption, but I think Uganda and Tanzania and some other countries were saying that Kenya must ensure that its anti-corruption authority has prosecutorial powers, because if that doesn't happen, then the convention will not come into being. But I don't know whether that has been resolved. And of course, EACC, I think, gives a lot of information about even people who shouldn't vie for positions because of their political or whatever. And the IBC did not disqualify those people. We used to do as public servants. Public servants do wealth declarations every year, and even when they do that, it is secret, and there's no reason why it should be secret. And even this idea of the lifestyle audit, this is an idea which has been mooted for a long time, and it doesn't see light of day. There are things that you do which make it harder, for people, to, like, you declare wealth, it is public, as you ask for positions, and if you can't explain, you are told you can't be, you can't be a leader, you can't continue. But otherwise, it is my wish that this remembrance will continue to really. SABA SABA is how do we fundamentally change our country so that these Gen Zs and the Alphas and the others to come find a country that works, where the Constitution is implemented. Because if actually we did implement the Constitution, a lot of things that people are saying are going south would not be doing so. But let me again, thank you very much. This remembrance is very critical, and what we will do together in our country, because even these politicians, I think we have to talk to them, so that they appreciate that it is not business as usual, and we together, change our country for the better. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Governor. I think there are some panelists who want to ask you questions before you head to Mass. I will open the floor for that. Guys, let's keep it down to at least 1 or 2 questions. Atmosphere, I'll let you shoot first.
Sorry, Afro, maybe before they start asking, Governor, Professor Kivuva, how much time do we have with you and Senator Omtatah? Because I know we are learning a lot from you. Tunapigwa sana huku kwa DMs, tunaambiwa inakuwa monologue, but I think it was important for us to at least hear the rot that Okiyah Omtatah has explained to us. And for me, I would love as much as possible to give people who have questions so that you can answer before you go. And then we really need to open the mic Afrocentric. I think you've said this before. Hii ni sauti ya mwananchi na mwananchi anafaa kusikika. We really thank all the people who are here. I think we still have almost 5,000 people still online. Professor and Okiyah.
And I think Professor should, since he indicated he wanted to leave, we should give Professor the chance.
So how do we have time with you, Okiyah? And Professor, how much time do you have with you?
Available. So let us give Professor a chance. And it's very important to listen to Professor because he's been around longer than I've been. He's been an exemplary public leader, and he has been a governor. And he's also a professor of law. He's not just a professor of anything else. He's a professor of law. So when we talk about rule of law, he's the guy to guide us.
Correct. Yeye ni
So
mwalimu hawa nini what are lawyers called? Mwalimu wa lawyer.
Yeah. So let him go, have the go. And me, I'm around. As I said, I'll go for my mass at.
So over to you. We have 20 minutes with.
Email. All right. Atmosphere. Mike is yours.
Thank you very much, Afro, for this chance. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever in the world you are. So mine is to ask Professor Daktari Mr. Kibwana. Well, maybe most of the people here don't know you've been around since the Moi era. And this is when SABA SABA people used to go and protest in the streets. And you have an impeccable record in leadership. You've been governor. I was particularly very interested in seeing how you ran Makueni County with people, with the people behind you. Meaning, you had this style of tendering where public participation was in the forefront of everything, and you would actually pay the people who had tendered when everyone from the public is satisfied that the projects were good. And that time was an interesting time because we will see other governors come to benchmark in Makueni, which is a very impeccable record. You are also Minister of Environment during Kibaki's time, and I've been following you for quite some time. So my question is, these current governors, what do you think is the biggest problem? Don't they have proper advice? Are they just greedy, or they don't have plans for their counties? That's the first question. The second question is the region, the eastern region, where we have perennial water problems. And then recently we saw very interesting times when floods were experienced. What will you advise that the people who are currently leaders in that region should do about the water situation? I'm particularly not from that region, but it's something I would like to hear what you think about it. Thank you.
Afro, Cedric, am I supposed to answer each question or after a few?
Oh, let's take. Let me take a couple of more. Let's see. Hannah, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Afro. Professor, thank you for joining us. And the senator went on telling us a lot of things that actually only brought to light that this system is not working. If him as a senator cannot get documentation from a governor and he has to go to court and he still cannot get those documents to prove wrongdoings in his area, then you can imagine what a normal person, as a local citizen, and how much tight his hands are. This is further proof that this system is not working. But he's actually told us a lot of things that are not right. The public lands that are taken or are sold illegally to people, and the place he was talking about was a border city that till the airport is no longer in the hands of the local authority. So him in that kind of position and facing all these issues, court cases, trying to go to court to obtain public information that would to correct the wrongdoings or to prove the wrongdoings. He also mentioned about public participation, that he got documents of tenders that then the court refused for him to use those as evidence. So this proves that this system is not working. It's not the people, it's the system that is allowing the looting, a system that is allowing the corruption, and the barriers that are put for the person who wants to prove the wrongdoings, rather than make it easier for the person who wants to prove the wrongdoings. Coming back to you, Professor, because for a reason I asked him about the whistleblowing. And without the whistleblowers, then we are none the wiser, unless you're in the same system and like Mutata, and you find out things are wrong. But if you're in a public domain, it's really difficult. So what I wanted to ask you is, because he mentioned